The toy market is a lucrative industry, generating a reported $84 billion in global revenue. And it makes sense. Everywhere around the world, toys generally make kids happy. Except when the CIA gets involved. According to the Washington Post, the spy agency concocted a plan in 2005 to develop Osama Bin Laden demon dolls aimed at scaring children and their parents. The goal? To instill fear in families that would cause them to turn away from the real terrorist. The 12-inch figurines were painted with a heat-dissolving material designed to peel off and reveal a red-faced demon-like creature with piercing green eyes and black facial markings. The code name for the project was Devil Eyes. The plan was to distribute the toys to children in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where the CIA was trying to win hearts and minds. The CIA claims only 3 prototypes were developed before the project was canceled. However, a source tells the Washington Post that hundreds of Bin Laden demon action figures were developed and sent to Karachi in 2006. Although the CIA did not move forward with the covert operation, one of the creepy demon figures reportedly remains at the agency's headquarters. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Marina Portnaya, RT.
Hi there, I'm Jared Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisman.
This is just how messed up things are, man. I can't believe it. Look, Osama doll? I mean, seriously?
Well, that's the demon, right? He's the boogeyman.
Now, this is what you should be afraid of. He's this big and immature, or made of plastic, a fantasy. Wait a second, was that out loud?
Talk about something that's just wrong.
I'm Jared Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisman.
This is Video Radio. We took a look at the right thing, but now we're taking a look at the wrong thing.
Recently, reports come out about sexual assaults in the Canadian Armed Forces. And of course, the government has decided to do what they usually do when they don't like what they receive.
Of course, propaganda is coming, but you be the judge. Check this out.
It's been called one of the military's dirty little secrets, but an internal review says when it comes to sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces, there's nothing to hide. The review was spurred by revelations in the media a few months ago that every day 5 people in the Canadian military are sexually assaulted. But while the review does admit nearly a third of women in the military feel harassed in some way, it concludes a significant overhaul is not considered necessary. Retired Colonel Michel Drapeau calls the 10-page review a whitewash. He says it talks more about sexual harassment than assault and doesn't even touch on how the crimes are or aren't investigated.
What's missing in there is sexual assault is a crime. And if it is a crime, it has to be handled by the military justice system. And the very word military justice system don't appear in the paper at all.
Phil Millar is a lawyer who represents 7 women who were assaulted by James Wilkes. The military medic was convicted of 25 counts of sexual assault and breach of trust in April. Millar says victims need to see concrete action from the chain of command. Now, the military has said it will conduct an external independent review into sexual misconduct, but the person tasked with leading that review will be picked by the military itself, leading some to wonder exactly how independent it will be.
So I think it's time for the Canadian Armed Forces to step up.
Maybe join the 21st century?
You know, we're not treating women like crap. If you take a look at the major protests that are happening in Japan, in Okinawa, where the American bases are expanded, these types of problems are reported all the time. But the Americans do the same thing too.
And of course, austerity programs have been taking effect everywhere around Europe.
Yes, and there was a major austerity protest in the UK. 50,000 people gathered in front of the BBC offices and were totally ignored.
However, the landlords have decided to take it upon themselves to deal with the homeless issue.
And how they're dealing with the homeless issue, austerity measures and people who are forced to sleep in the park.
It's barbaric.
This is the wrong way to do it. Check this out.
Well, these small spikes have caused uproar on social media over the last couple of days. The so-called anti-homeless spikes, well, they're more like the sort of thing that you'd see on windowsills to prevent pigeons from landing there, but it seems that these have been installed to prevent homeless people from sleeping rough in this spot. And it sparked wide-scale debate, with everyone from the Mayor of London, who called them ugly, self-defeating and stupid, to members of the public and even some of the residents who we've spoken to who live here, who want to see the spikes removed.
It's almost obscene. I mean, I was really offended when I saw it myself, because I thought it's sending an awful bad message to homeless people, you know. It's saying, move from here, don't come back, but move somewhere else. And I think that's not going to solve the problem.
But others supported it. One resident coming out to angrily remove the banners protesting the spikes. The finger of blame is pointing towards one of the private property's management companies, but they've so far failed to respond to RT's questions. Other areas of London too have seen similar measures, like this supermarket in a central London high street. Charities that have been documenting the rising number of homeless in London say this simply isn't the way to deal with the issue. Well, the London Mayor's office points to the fact that they've already invested £34 million in schemes like No Second Night Out, designed to try to ensure that rough sleepers never spend more than one evening on the street. The reality, though, from what we're told by homeless charities and from what the figures seem to indicate, is that homelessness and rough sleeping is an ongoing and growing problem. And this latest controversial anti-homeless spikes that have appeared, perhaps a sad indication of just how far Britain still has to go in tackling this issue.
So that's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah, I think somebody should run around with a grinder and start taking care of those things.
I mean, or maybe take the bureaucrat that allowed them to be installed and throw him into the unemployment line. How about that? However, that would be a solution that works.
Speaking of the wrong thing, the Detroit city management has really gone off the rails.
Fascism being what it is, that's when your corporation is more important or your policies are more important than the people that you're damaging. And in the United States and Detroit, so ravaged by the world economy, they're actually shutting people's water off.
But however, it's part of a special idea to, corporatize the commons.
Check this out.
In recent months in Detroit, up to 3,000 people per week have been getting their water shut off because they haven't paid their bill for a couple months, owing maybe $150 at the most. Local activists estimate that this could impact nearly 200,000 people in Detroit. And we're going into the hot time of summer, and people are questioning why, and do people have a right to water? It is a basic human right to water. And Mark Lucas of The Guardian has written a great article about this that I recommend. In it, he says, the targeting of Detroit families is about something else. It is a ruthless case of the shock doctrine, the exploitation of natural or unnatural shocks of crisis to push through pro-corporate policies that couldn't happen in any other circumstances. Charity Hicks, a community activist at Detroit People's Water Board, said this in the article in The Guardian. She said, there are people who can't cook, can't clean, people coming off surgery who can't wash. This is an affront to human dignity. She said, this is a test being looked at by cities across the U.S., even the world. We will not let water be used as a weapon to remake the city in a corporate image. We will reestablish what it is to live in a democracy with a water system that is part of the commons, that affirms human dignity and that ensures everyone's access.
What do you make of Detroit's argument that they need to shut off the water to recoup millions of dollars that they've lost? Well,
then that raises the question, then why don't they shut it off to the larger clients who are owing millions of dollars? Because of the bankruptcy negotiations, a lot of these larger corporations haven't paid what they owe because they're being litigated, all these things. And the part that makes this obscene, it's not like there isn't water, you see. It's a cruelty. And it's treating people, it's treating people as if they aren't human.
Okay, so Detroit water situation, and I mean, last one we talked about the Council of Canadians standing up against it.
Because water is a human right.
And you know, in the States, popping up all over the place, it's illegal to collect rainwater. That caused the overthrow of the government in South America. We're going to be covering that in a documentary coming up here.
Now,
however,
in the past little while, the Pope has been hitting them out of the park.
and I have been saying it straight out, this Pope is not looking Catholic. He's speaking against capitalism. He's talking about holding their own bank accountable and throwing child molesters out.
However, recently he spoke at a conference on drug policy, and he kind of dropped the ball.
Yes, indeed. He hits a couple out of the park, and then this.
Pope Francis was on a roll, but he finally messed up, and it has to do with drugs. Now, he had a great run for quite a while, and pretty much any time he got national news coverage, or I should say international news coverage, it was because he was saying something incredibly reasonable, rational, and compassionate about a variety of topics when it comes to how we should treat homosexuals, global inequality, the plight of the poor. Pretty much one after another, he was just cranking out hits, and even atheists like me were in his corner. We were rooting for the Pope, but not this time. He was speaking at a drug enforcement conference in Rome, and he had this to say about legalization efforts. Even limited attempts to legalize recreational drugs are not only highly questionable from a legislative standpoint, but they fail to produce the desired effects. And he went on to say that providing addicts with drugs doesn't solve the problem and is rather a veiled means of surrendering to the phenomenon. Now, lest you believe that I might be sort of reading between the lines and going a little bit too far and condemning the Pope, he finally says, "Let me state this in the clearest terms possible. The problem of drug use is not solved with drugs." It seemed like this Pope was less driven by the need to conform to the tradition of his religion and more capable than other popes we've had in the past few decades to look at the world, see the problems that we actually have, and then think about potential solutions and what effect they would actually have. Like, it seemed like he cared more about the actual best outcomes for people. But in this case, it's the same as every, conservative politician we have in the U.S. It's just they've been brought up to think that drugs are bad for you, and they think thus that legalization is not the solution. He completely misses the whole point. I understand that he is driven by compassion, at least to the extent that he looks at people who have drug problems and he doesn't want them to have those problems. That has nothing to do with legalization. That Pope Francis, who was the atheist pope for a while there, doesn't get it when it comes to drugs.
So after, saying this Pope is so cool, what do we get?
He drops the ball. He scores on his own goal.
Yeah, he did, man. That one was like taking a foul in the World Cup during the shot. Okay, coming up next, we're going to be talking about migrant children in the U.S. and a story that's offensive, to say the least.
And how medics are complicit in torture.
So make sure you stay tuned. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet, and we're talking about the wrong thing.
We'll be right back after this commercial message.
Yummy, it's McDonald's Chicken McNuggets. All white meat, boneless, factory farm chicken treated with vaccines and hormones.
Cut, just read the ingredients, don't tell them about the factory farm stuff.
Yummy, it's McDonald's Chicken McNuggets. Chicken, water and salt, enriched flour, yellow corn flour, bleached wheat flour, baking soda, cornstarch, wheat starch, modified food starch, dextrose, riboflavin, folic acid, spices, and thiamine mononitrate, which can lead to severe liver damage.
Cut!
Niacin, citric acid, reduced iron, calcium lactate, sodium phosphate, sodium acid pyrophosphate, sodium aluminum phosphate, monocalcium phosphate, all of which are linked to chronic kidney disease, weak bones, and premature death.
Cut!
Why don't you guys just make it out of chicken?
Cut!
Autolyzed yeast extract, which is basically MSG, natural flavoring, which can mean anything, safflower oil, vegetable oil, and hydrogenated soybean oil with TBHQ, a chemical preservative, which is a form of butane and is linked to stomach tumors.
Cut!
And finally, dimethylpolysiloxane, which is a silicone that's used in cosmetics and breast implants and silly putty and to treat head lice. Mmm, yummy. McDonald's, eat like a champion.
Okay, now take a bite of the McNugget.